Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on Utah's worker shortage. Ever since COVID-19 restrictions began easing up, allowing for local businesses to open back up to full capacity, we've been hearing about labor shortages and difficulties in hiring. What's causing this issue? How does it impact the services that you receive as a consumer? And what are some employers doing to incentivize people to apply? Kicking off our conversation tonight is William Bruce, owner of Robintino's and Bout Time Pub. And William, thank you so much for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Rosie, glad.
Give us some perspective on the number of businesses that you manage. How many Robintino locations, how many Bout Time locations?
Okay, so we took on about 4.5 years ago, 6 Bout Times. We now have also included in that group 4 Robintino's. We built 3 Robintino's last 7 months, and then we just got another one going into Harriman by the end of the year.
That's
so
a lot of math. So
it
that's
is.
What, 11?
13.
13.
Yeah, we'll have
Okay.
13 by the end of the year.
That's a lot of math, but a lot of businesses that you're overseeing. That's awesome.
Yes.
Tell me about how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted business, operations, sales when it first hit last year and then throughout 2020.
I think that we would just sum it up as messy. Lucky for us, we had we were in a restaurant seminar meeting with some of the leaders around the world in Park City. 75 people get together, and we had someone from owns 1,500 senior homes globally, and she said on the first day, first minute of that seminar, she asked us, "How many of you are on phase 2 of the COVID crisis?" And I was looking to my wife.
Phase 2?
Yeah,
what?
phase 2. What is she talking about? This is March 1st. And luckily that kind of gave us a heads up that other things were happening. She gave us some tips. We're on the phone with our banker, and our banker was like, "It's business as usual, William." And it wasn't. 4 days later, he's calling us asking, "What do we do?" And we didn't know, but we had a heads up. We stopped ordering food. We stopped ordering things from our suppliers because we knew we were going to be shut down.
Wow.
We got lucky.
So did you deal with any shutoffs or layoffs or anything like that?
We did. We paid our employees, but we did have the pubs that closed. You couldn't do that in a bar. We could do curbside pizza at Robintino's, and that's why we decided to open more here in the future. And we kind of went that route. And then the pandemic kind of came to an end, and we started to reopen, get back in the marketplace.
It really challenged us to be creative in different ways.
It did.
People still need to eat. Right?
They do.
So now that COVID-19 restrictions have eased up, right? Some places are being able to open back up to full capacity. Some employers are ready to hire.
Yes.
What has your businesses been experiencing when it comes to trying to fill those open positions?
Rosie, I think you're right. I think it was very difficult after the pandemic. All of us were struggling. People trying to rehire their old employees going and taking care of family that had COVID crises. We were opening new businesses, competing with the businesses that were reopening. And so we had to get on our tippy toes a little bit and say, what are we going to do different? And we decided for the new places that were opening, we'd go to the high schools after school and see which cars were there. And there might only be 50 cars in that lot. And we know those were the kids that were busy. And so we really went to them. We looked at our competitor. We paid a little bit more. We wanted to give more per hour, and it helped us. The kids came in, and we were able to hire for our businesses, and we kind of got lucky on that too. Because the Indeed and Recruiter and other things weren't quite pulling in like everybody else was using. So you had to think really different.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Right now, are you all still dealing with any type of shortages?
No, currently we're not, but I will say one Friday night my family went to our busiest restaurant, Robintino's, up in Bountiful. It seats 200 people, and as we're sitting there I thought, how come the upstairs isn't open? This is February. And so I went to the general manager and he said, well, I just don't have enough people. And so at a few points you have to, okay, we got to help this general manager, and we got to give some bonuses to them for hiring and things like that, and do the work. You just had to put the work in and make it competitive even amongst the team.
Would you say those incentives, the bonuses, the extra pay is something that probably made the difference between being able to fill those positions and not being able to fill those positions?
I think it was an integral part. We asked friends to bring friends in. We gave them a $100 bonus if that friend lasted 60 days. We gave people meals to come in and just interview with us. Free pizza if you come in and interview. And we were doing little things like that. And you wanted to build your team. I don't think people work for the more, I mean, we are paying more. I don't think that was so much the answer. I think if they wanted to work for a boss or a company where our culture was, hey, come be a part of us and be a winner. I mean, that's what we're trying to show and share, and certainly with our GMs who we meet with every 2 weeks in a big meeting, we do that culture. Let's win and let's hire and let's have the best hires in the state.
I think at the end of the day, that's what people want. They want to wake up and look forward to going to work. They want to enjoy working for their employer because at the end of the day, that's a big integral part of your quality of life.
It is.
William, we have time for final words, 30 seconds left. What are you looking ahead to in the future, or what would you like to leave our viewers with tonight?
I think that we ought to be more kind to each other because there are shortages and people are leery about coming back. Hey, I might get sick. You know, people are thinking that, or they're taking care of their parents or a loved one. And like today I was in a business and something we were doing, she was new, she was so new, and she's trying to get these things done in the computer, and I had a line of 3 people behind me. And one of the people behind me was yelling after 15 minutes, but it wasn't the new employee's fault. It was just the moment. It was the timing that this employee was new. She was calling her supervisor over back and forth, and you wanted to just say, she's new. We should become more kind to each other because we are having shortages, and let's help one another. Put our arm around each other and say, we got you.
I love that. I think everyone should work in the service industry at least once in their life.
They should.
At least.
At least.
Thank you so much. You've been hearing from William Bruce. He is the owner of Robintino's and Bout Time Pub. William, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was fun. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on Utah's worker shortage. Joining our conversation next is Melva. She is the CEO and president of the Utah Restaurant Association. And Melva, it's great to have you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Rosie. I appreciate being here.
Melva, you heard about William talk in the last segment about what his restaurants are going through. What has the Utah Restaurant Association been hearing from other businesses in their quest to fill those open positions?
So we're hearing basically the same comments that they're all seeking. We have some restaurants who are looking to hire seniors and try and bring senior workforce back, as well as going into, as Bruce mentioned, the high schools. We have a really great program called Pro Start where we educate 11th and 12th graders to get them ready to work in the restaurant industry. So that's a great opportunity. The high schools are a resource for us to go into. So it is a difficult time, but we are the industry of opportunity, and anyone who comes to work in the restaurant industry will rise faster than they will rise in any other industry. So this is still a great industry to go to work for.
And the skills that you develop in the restaurant industry will take you a long way in life.
Absolutely.
I say that because I grew up in the restaurant industry for 15 years. Melva, tell me about how can a shortage that a restaurant or a business face impact their day-to-day operations or the services and products that they can provide to consumers?
So one of the hardest things for the restaurants is to be open their full amount of hours. During the pandemic, they were at 40 to 50% occupancy most of the days. And then as the pandemic ended, we had all of those restaurants open up on the same day. So usually we can handle a few restaurants opening here and there and whatnot, but when all restaurants need services and they need all of these employees and they need all of it at the same time, that's a burden on any industry. And so we do see restaurants that have cut hours, aren't open as long. We know that there are some restaurants who are staying closed on certain days, maybe they're slower days and whatnot. So they're having to adjust and meet those challenges so that they can train their people and that they can hire people. And it's just a matter of getting people back to work and back in that spirit that, you know, we need to support the economy, we need to support these industries and these businesses.
I've also seen some businesses even temporarily halt their curbside services to go along with some of the things that you've said because they're just short on staff. Melva, do you think that it helps for employers to incentivize people by offering higher wages or maybe bonuses when they're looking to hire people?
I think we're seeing a positive impact on that now, that the government isn't perhaps assisting people at various levels, and so now we can offer an incentive. I mean, most of the pay is double the minimum wage out there now. People are paying $14, $15 for entry-level workers, and that means that there's still a lot of training and a lot of those things that an operator has to expend funds on to make sure that the people are trained, have customer service skills, and do those things. So I think you're seeing them offer. I mean, we have heard of restaurants offering anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 in bonuses for people to come to work for them. And I mean, you have to stay for a certain amount of time, but absolutely we're invested. Our employees are our family. We care about them. We want to take care of them. We want them to serve our customers. We want everyone to have a great experience, our employees and our patrons.
Right, and that's a good chunk of change in those bonuses that some are offering. Melva, what are some resources that may be available for restaurant business owners who are still struggling?
So we know there are a lot of people struggling. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which was $28.6 billion, we had 1,472 restaurants apply for that, and only 429 restaurants got that fund and that grant, and so there's still a lot struggling. We're working to replenish that fund and asking Congress to put the money in there. If they put in the $60 billion we're requesting, every one of the applicants, and there were over 200,000 unfulfilled applicants in the entire nation, we could fulfill all of those with $60 billion. So we're hoping that Congress acts and gives these people the resources that they need.
Well, thank goodness we have organizations like the Utah Restaurant Association to advocate and vouch for those efforts. Thank you so much. You've been hearing from Melva, CEO and President of the Utah Restaurant Association. And Melva, thank you so much for participating in this discussion with us. It was great to have you back.
Thank you, Rosie.
We'll be right back. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on Utah's worker shortage. Rounding out our conversation tonight is Mark Nold, Chief Economist for the Utah Department of Workforce Services. And Mark, thank you so much for being here tonight and being a part of this discussion with us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Mark, we've been hearing a lot these past couple of months about labor shortages. What exactly does that mean?
Well, a labor shortage is, in the short answer, is the demand for labor is outpacing the supply of labor. So in other words, the business community is saying, I need this volume of workers, I need this amount of people to come and fill my needs and so on. And it comes from the labor force, it comes from society. And it is not supplying the amount of labor that it needs right now, that is being asked for. It's a very unique situation. I don't think I have seen what would be called a labor shortage to this magnitude in my 30 years that I've been doing this job. It's a very unique situation, and it's pandemic driven.
Definitely. What does June's number tell us about Utah's increased labor demand? How significant is the growth that happened in that 1 month period of time?
Good question. In that, just from May, we were measuring the economy here recently by kind of skipping over the pandemic period and going back 2 years to go back to a trend and trying to anchor to that trend when we look at the economy again. And in May, the job growth for over 2 years was 2.3%. In June, it had jumped to 3.3%. That's a 1 percentage point increase largely in a 1 month period. That is something we rarely see. And so that's speaking to several things. The veracity, the livelihood in the Utah economy. It's also speaking that there is labor that is responding to this. I know that we're speaking about labor shortages. The heart and the base fundamental problem is that the pandemic, before the economy hit with the pandemic, you could almost like say the Utah economy took a big breath and was at this size. And then it deflated during the pandemic. And then sometime around May, June, when we started getting into the warm months in the springtime, the vaccinations seemed to be taking effect. The media wasn't talking about COVID anymore. It wanted to go back here, but the breath wasn't there to go in with it. The labor wasn't there to supply it. So we had the economy that's kind of a muscle memory thing. It was at this size. When, so to speak, the shackles were removed, the economy wanted to go back to this size. But people had trepidations about the labor force and coming back into it. We see various reasons why. Some would be just, well, it's still, I'm not convinced yet that this is over. I still don't want to get out and interact with people. You also have those who, sometimes when you lose a job, it can be a while to transition to something else or to transition to a new skill set. sometimes your labor is just missing. I use Logan as an example where Utah State University is part of their labor pool, but yet they're not up there in college. So that's missing. And then the unemployment benefits were needed during the pandemic, but as time got on, maybe they could have been pulled back and they may became a disincentive for work. They were done and removed at the end of June, so we will see when we finally get the July and August jobs report if we will see a noticeable increase in improvement because of that.
So the larger question here, is there excess labor to be had? How long is it going to take for our working age population to re-engage to the levels that we saw before the pandemic?
Good question, because when we do talk of labor shortage, I'm saying in the immediate, the demand is this high and the supply is this low, and this can be people who make decisions not to come back in. But the bigger picture is if the economy was at this level and everybody did come back, is there enough people to do it? And I think there is, because we have some measures where right before the COVID, when you had a very low unemployment rate, we called it full employment, you had a very fully engaged labor force. You were either working or looking for work. We call that a participation rate. It was very high at around 68.5%. When COVID hit, that fell down to 67%. So you lost about 35,000 people who just stopped engaging in the labor force, stopped looking for a job, which means they stopped being counted in the unemployment rate, and they go off to the sidelines, so to speak. I call it the silent labor pool and available labor pool that's sitting there. So you have about 35,000 people in total where that happened during COVID. I'd say about 10,000 of them or so have made their way back, so there's probably a good 25,000 or so that could come back yet to equal where we were with the labor supply before the pandemic.
Mark, which industries do you think are going to have the toughest time bouncing back?
The ones that were impacted the most by it, and not, again, the service industries, the industries that had the much customer interaction, much lack of social distancing, let's say, or isolation in the labor force. Any business that lost their labor force or parts of it for a long period of time is going to have a hard time building it back up. There were other industries, like the healthcare industry had a setback within the first month or two, but it was so short that they came right back. Some other industries were like that. They came right back. But the industries like the restaurant industries, let's call it caterings, let's call it conventions, any hotel industries, any of these ones that are in the service industries and will hire into lower skill levels and so on, but were idled for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 15 months, and so those are the ones that are going to have the most trouble building their labor force back.
Now, Mark, I know we don't have a magic ball to look into, but how long do you think it will take, maybe minimum, for us to see the economy bounce back to pre-pandemic levels? And do you think it helps that some employers are providing these extra incentives to get people to apply?
Yeah, the incentives help. It's needed. They have to try and think outside the box to try and get the labor to entice them to come, and they're kind of bidding with each other, and so you kind of maybe a little bit sweeter pot over here will bring other people in. I think they're going to be playing this kind of game or up against this struggle all the way through the rest of this year into the early parts of next year. I think, again, it's very fluid in terms of losing jobs and bringing the economy back and want to ask for people. But the labor force is more frictional or sticky. It takes them a little longer. And so it needs more time to catch up to the pace of the instant demand. And so that's going to happen as we move on through the rest of this year. I worry about things like the ski industries, maybe particularly like the Deer Valleys, Park Cities, where over the last 10 years they've had to go outside of the country to get a labor supply and bring them in to work their industry. And now is the time for them to be doing that recruiting. They are probably doing it, but with the kind of possible resurgence here of COVID, will that impact them at the time for letting the labor come into the country and help them? So those are questions that are still ahead. The answer to it all is it's really going to work at the pace that COVID says it is. COVID is still in control here. As I've said, COVID was the big dragon. We feel that we've wrestled that dragon last year, but it's got a long tail.
Right.
And so it's still going to work its way on into the rest of this year and on into the early parts of next year.
So interesting. We might have to bring you back to do another analysis in maybe 6 months or so.
Yeah, I'd like to see how it would change. I really am interested in the short run here very soon, because again, when they closed down the federal unemployment extensions, that was 12,000 people that were impacted by that. So there's 12,000 people who now have an incentive to come out and look for a job.
All right, thank you so much. You've been hearing from Mark Nold. He is the Chief Economist for the Utah Department of Workforce Services. Mark, thank you so much for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll be right back.